we will bring those questions to the panelists, if time allows. And then, at the very end of our session, at the last question, you'll be given 90 seconds as a closing remark. So are there any questions from the panelists on procedure? Fine, we'll work through this. This is a friendly place. So as time allows, and your attention to the questions specifically be directed by the panelists to you, and of course to our audience. Amen? So, having said that, let us, in fact, begin. Okay, I'm going to, as a pastor, I don't carry money, usually. Anybody got a coin? Oh, there you go, my brother. Isn't that funny? All right. My wife makes me use a debit card and everything I do nowadays. So, good stewardship. So, may we defer to the lady? Lady's choice. Heads or tails? Heads. And it is heads. So, Ms. Bean, you have the first question. And the first question will be presented by Ms. Natalie Harvey. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Forgive me. You have the first opening statement. You have 90 seconds for the opening statement.
I'm glad to open.
You may begin.
Can you hear me without the microphone?
No, not too well.
I'm not.
Press the button at the bottom, and you'll see it eliminate. There you go.
Are we better now?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Okay. Thank you. Too much allergies in the air. Hello, my name is Sheila Bean, and I am running for the House District 121. That's why we're all here tonight. I am a constitutional conservative Republican. What does that mean? In my terms, that means that I believe the Constitution is a priority in the platform for which I'm running. I am a pro-life candidate. I believe in protecting life from conception to natural death and the many varieties in between that we need to protect. First, we protect life. Second, we protect the Constitution. We defend it, we acknowledge it, we work within its parameters, we pass laws that are within its parameters. When these foundations are solid, then the other priorities that we have to address as legislators will come in their own right behind these. These may be immigration, education, taxes, other items, but we do have to have a foundation on which to stand to begin with. My history is that of a regular citizen. I've never run for office before. I am a former school teacher. I have taught in the public schools. I have homeschooled my children, a couple of them. And I have had children here at Saks. My daughter graduated in '09, right here at Saks. And I've had grandchildren in Christian school. I believe that my other experience of being a business owner, a small business owner, has a great factor. I've learned how to serve other people. For 35 years, my husband and I ran a business here in San Antonio. I know how it is to listen, to serve, and now I'm ready to be the voice for the values of this district that have not been represented for the last 10 years. I think I have a little bit of time left, but I'm going to let it go at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mr. Judson, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you to all of you at San Antonio Christian School for hosting this. We've got a great crowd tonight, and I'm very pleased to share the stage with Sheila. I consider her a partner in this endeavor. We both realize the importance to the state and the country to have new leadership, especially in the Speaker's office. My background is one of conservative activism really my whole life. The first 8 years out of college was kind of a training ground. I went to Washington, D.C., worked on Capitol Hill, and learned how laws are made, moved back to San Antonio and was a direct report to General Robert F. McDermott at USAA. But the most formative years were the 8 years I spent as president of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, working side by side with Alan Parker, who officed next door in the sister organization, the Justice Foundation. And I fought big government and tried to give good ideas to reduce the size and increase the efficiency of government. I'm probably best known in San Antonio for leading the fight twice to stop the light rail streetcar project downtown, which is probably the worst example of cronyism that has been foisted on the taxpayers in San Antonio. We defeated that twice, and most recently, just last year, where we amended the city charter to require that we would have a vote on any rail system. I have had direct encounters with Speaker Straus and efforts that I've been working to pass in Austin, conservative reforms, and I realized that unless we had a different Speaker of the House, that there are some very, very important laws that we really need for our liberties that will never pass unless we have somebody new in that office. And so I ask for your vote, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Judson. At this point in time, we're going to begin with the forum questions. These questions will be in the areas of politics, education, immigration, sanctity of human life, transportation, and in fiscal matters. So the first question, because Ms. Bean, you opened with the first session, you get the first question as well. You will have the closing remark, Mr. Judson, at the end. You will have your first chance at that. So I would now direct your attention to Ms. Natalie Hardy, who will answer the first question. Once again, you have 90 seconds to answer.
Here's the first question. What are one or two top priorities for a candidate during an election campaign, and why?
The top priority for a candidate during the election campaign is to reach the voters, is to spend as much time going one-on-one, door knocking, and getting to know the voters and looking them in the eye and meeting them at the door, talking to them, hearing what their issues are, being clear that what they want is what I plan to listen for, take care of in Austin. Second on the campaign trail, it is to be accountable to your constituents, that what you say at the door when you're talking to people or in places when you're answering a lot of questionnaires is to make sure that you're accountable for all that you say and that you have a strong foundation from which you come so that your words are what you believe.
Mr. Judson?
We open our campaign staff meetings every morning with prayer, and just about every day we pray that the truth would prevail in this race and that the truth would multiply. And you all are all key in that second part, the truth multiplying. The challenge with this race is that our current Speaker of the House does not vote, so he has no voting record to point to. That's what most races, you just simply have to look at what a person's voting record is, and that tells a story. And unfortunately, Speaker Straus has not voted since 2007, so you have a little bit of history there, but and he doesn't take public positions on issues, so it's a little bit of a challenge to explain to people why we need to replace somebody who has so much power and represents this district. And so the priority for me has been to connect with the voters, build a little bit of trust with them in the few seconds I have standing on their doorstep, and then open their eyes to what is happening in Austin, peel back the veil of what is really going on. And it's a very rich story. Hopefully I'll get a chance to explain this chart at some point, but it's a rich story, but it takes a few words to explain.
Thank you, sir. The second question is going to be asked to Mr. Reckner, and Mr. Justin, you will answer the question first.
Good evening to you both. What might be the campaign strategy behind a candidate's choosing not to attend or be represented at a gathering in the political district he or she seeks to represent?
I have yet to appear at any event with Speaker Straus or even a representative at any event. Whenever we have spoken to the same group, he has insisted that he not appear with us, The only time I've been with him was at the Express News editorial board, which was a very friendly audience for him. But it's very sad. I think I don't really know what's in the speaker's heart in not wanting to appear with us. I just think it's sad that the voters don't have the opportunity to understand and discern the differences and to ask questions and for us to hold each other accountable so that you all can learn what our true positions are. I think that the voters lose out. I think this is a very important constituency and a very important part of the district, and I just wish he was here.
Ms. Bean?
Yes, I think it speaks for yourself when you won't show up to represent your actions. His words when he mails out brochures can say anything they want, but when you stand before your constituents and are ready to take questions from the audience or from anyone that says that you believe in what you've said and what you've done, if you don't show up, then you have to draw your own conclusions from that. Like Jeff won't put words in Mr. Straus's mouth, but it certainly has been our record of every time he's at an event, he gives his speech, and then when the candidates line up to give a 2-minute presentation, he's out the back door, and he doesn't even, in my opinion, respect the audience enough to give even a 2-minute independent speech of his positions. So again, he's riding the fence, and he's not standing accountable. We have to stand accountable to you, the voters.
The next question, Ms. Bean, is directed first to you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for being here and for taking the time from your own lives to run for office. So I appreciate it. Why in Texas do important bills such as school choice and religious liberty pass easily in the Senate but not in the House?
That's because we in Texas have elected a good conservative lieutenant governor who wants these bills to be the laws because the people of Texas want these bills to become law. And so our Senate not only has a great leader, and we have a great governor who's conservative, but there are members of the Senate who work very hard to have these bills passed. Then when they are presented to the House, Speaker Straus finds a committee to bury them in, to make sure that they go to the committee where he has appointed chairman and vice chairman who are more liberal or moderate. In the 2015 session, Speaker Straus selected for his chairman and vice chairman over half of the committee chairmanships were Democrats, while only 1/3 of the body of the House was Democrats. That's more chairmans and vice chairmans of committees than there actually were representatives there, proportionately ratio. So he is letting these committees, these bills, die in committee. And that's his way he calls leadership.
Sir?
I'm going to refer to this chart. This is the average voting score of all the Republicans in the House. They score an 82.5 average. So half the Republicans, if you were to chart every Republican in the House of Representatives, half of the dots would be above this line and half would be below. These two lines represent the committee chair appointments of Speaker Straus and what their voting scores are. You can see that this Republican here scores in the 50s, this is in the 60s. You don't get up into the 70s until way over here. So all of his committee chairs are far more liberal than the average of the House. Then you have these Democrats who represent the extreme left of even the Democratic Party. This is Joe Straus's leadership team. So when the Senate passes a good bill, such as the school choice bill or the governor's ethics bill or a sanctuary cities bill or what have you, it is referred to one of these committees where it dies in committee. If it were to be reported to the floor of the House, it would likely pass because we have a 2/3 Republican majority. But it dies in committee because these chairs are much more liberal than the rest of the House. And therefore, we see bill after bill after bill die in committee, oftentimes without even a hearing, which is really a slap in the face to both the Senate leadership, often the governor, and to all the voters of Texas who would like that legislation to pass.
The next question, candidates, is a yes or no one-word response answer. Mr. Redland.
I'd like to also say thank you for joining us here tonight on behalf of the school and the students. Thank you for allowing the opportunity to meet you and for the experience for the students who this may be their first political event. So yes or no, do you support appointing members of the minority party to be chairman of a House committee when the majority party has a clear mandate from the voters?
First response, Mr. Judson.
No.
Ms. Bean?
No.
Thank you. The next round of questions are going to be from the area of education. Ms. Bean, you'll have the first response to the question. Ms. Hardy will present.
Here's your question. Is there a correlation between the quality of education and money expended? Please explain your answer. Thank you.
Between quality of education and money expended?
Correct.
Okay. Yes and no. You do have to pay the teachers, and you have to pay the teachers well, because they're the ones in the trenches. They're the ones that need the financial support to get the job done. They're the ones that are working for it. Yes, there is a correlation between how much money is spent. But the question is, where is that money being spent? Is it being spent on the teachers' salaries, on technical equipment to keep our students in the 21st century? Or is it being spent on grandiose buildings and administrators that are layered way too deep to be, in my opinion, effective? There's too much administrative levels that are sucking the cash out of the education department or education in each school district. Likewise, the teachers are the ones who need the majority of the money. They are the ones who are doing the work, and they're the ones who need to earn a better living. They're preparing. What we pay our teachers to prepare our next generation is nothing compared to the work that they are accomplishing. So I'm not in favor of grandiose buildings and overpaid administrators, but I am in favor of the money that needs to be allocated for teachers and their support.
Thank you, Ms. Bean. Mr. Judson.
This is a very important question because we have a school finance lawsuit that is sitting in the Texas Supreme Court and that the next session of the legislature will deal with. I believe that if either Sheila or I are successful in winning this race, that the governor will probably wait till the regular session to deal with school finance, but the legislature will be reforming school finance. But all of the lawsuits that have been filed by the school districts against the state have all sued the state for more money. And every year the legislature gives the education system more money, more money, more money. We've now done this for the last 20 plus years, and we're not getting better outcomes, but we are spending a lot more money. The problem is that you have parts of the system that are fundamentally broken, and if all you do is give those parts more money, it does not fix the system. In fact, it may make it worse, it may make it more corrupt. I think you see that. What we need is a system where money follows excellence. And the best people to determine what is excellent in a school system are the parents who have the most at stake with their children. If the money is controlled by where the parents want the money spent and it follows the child, that will drive excellence throughout the entire system. That's what the research shows in the 27 states that have school choice all around the country.
The next question, Mr. Judson, you'll be the first to answer. Ms. Hardy will present. I'm sorry. Is it you, Mr. Wagner? My apologies, sir. You're up.
What are 1 or 2 actions that should be taken to improve the education outcome of Texas schools?
Well, I guess picking up where I left off with my last question, I think the single most important thing is to pass school choice. That was the moment where I realized that we would never have school choice as long as Joe Straus was the speaker, because I was sitting in his office. The Senate had just passed a great school choice bill. It was referred to the House, and Joe Straus told me that unfortunately his leadership did not like the bill, and that bill died in committee without a hearing. What the research shows is that you cannot improve the public school system without school choice. Competition drives excellence throughout every sector of the economy, and education is no different. We come up with all of these bureaucratic rules, just like we've tried to do with Obamacare, and it doesn't drive excellence. It just creates more rules and more rules, these one-size-fits-all systems that frustrate teachers, they frustrate parents, and we need a school choice system. Lieutenant Governor Patrick has already said this will be a priority of his next legislative session. We just need to make sure that there's leadership in the House that will accept it and pass it when it shows up in the House.
Thank you, sir. The next question is a yes or no. And you'll forgive me, I'm not caffeinated enough for this event. I apologize. At some point in time, it'll kick in and we'll get a little better. Just be my apology. Would you please?
No problem. I have a shorter answer, but
by all means.
Jeff is much more knowledgeable in this area because I know he's done a lot of research and work in it. I totally agree with him. The key element in improving our schools is going to be school choice. Competition, as he said, is what runs any success. Having been a business person for 35 years, I know that competition is what made us stay ahead of our game. It made us work harder to do better at what we did because the competition could catch up with us any day, any time, and try to overtake our business. Competition in the schools is the money. It's where the money goes. The money must follow the children. The money, we need free choice. We need schools like parents that send their children to Saks need to have the financial benefit of having their tax money follow them. Whether that's homeschool or public school, charter schools, or private schools. I believe that competition is going to improve our education system.
Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Bean, you'll have the first response to this next question, which is a yes or no question.
Would you support a voucher program that would allow parents alternative choices on where to send their children to school?
Most definitely yes.
Yes.
The next question is also yes or no, and Mr. Judson, you'll be the first to respond.
Yes or no? Since the Texas Senate passed school choice with a bipartisan supermajority, should the Texas House give school choice a hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
The next series of topic questions are about immigration. So, Ms. Bean, you'll have the first response to the question.
Here's your question. What are we as a state, you as a state rep, willing and able to do to enforce the existing immigration laws?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What are we as a state and you as a state rep willing to, what are we as a state and you as a state rep willing and able to do to enforce the existing immigration laws?
I believe that the state of Texas and its representatives need to, number one, provide to the DPS, the Border Patrol, the technology and the equipment that they need to patrol the border and to know when and where people are coming across. In our business out at Stinson Airport, we fueled the airplanes for the DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, as they would take these airplanes to the border area and be able to fly over it at a very high altitude and see every single individual down on the ground in the area around the border where they needed to protect. The state of Texas had the opportunity this last session to take enough money to buy two Pilatus airplanes, which are several $100,000 each, and all the equipment in it which matches that, 3 helicopters and plenty of ground control support, and they had that money available. And they chose instead to spend that money on diversity training for state employees. Excuse me, that's not where our money needs to go. Our money needs to go to protect the border and to support the people who are out there defending the border.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Judson?
Well, we need to elect a new president so that the federal government will assume its responsibility of protecting our borders. That would be a good first step. But within the state of Texas, we need to outlaw sanctuary cities. This is where municipalities instruct their police departments not to ask the immigration status of people they apprehend for crimes. That's insane. It sends the message to illegal migrants, come on up, because one unit of government is going to shield you from another unit of government. That needs to be stopped. Bills outlawing sanctuary cities have died in the Texas House the last 2 legislative sessions. Governor Abbott has sent a letter to sheriffs across the state telling them that sanctuary cities will not be tolerated, but he has limited authority because he doesn't have that legislation that passed. We need to pass the Interstate Border Compact bill that passed the Senate and again died in the House. It would have given the state the ability to enforce U.S. immigration law in cooperation with another state, and we need to revisit that issue. And then lastly, we do need to maintain our border security, but hopefully that burden actually goes down if the federal government assumes its responsibility.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Judson, you'll have a response to the second question.
What specific reforms do you believe are needed to fix our current immigration system?
First, we need to enforce existing law, and that includes deporting people who are here illegally, and that's just part of the law. It's always been enforced. It's never been an issue. Every previous U.S. president has enforced our laws, including deportations, and it's only now is it this big politically incorrect debate. So we need to just enforce existing law. We also need to ratchet down the number of refugees that we're allowing into the United States. And let me put this in context. The United States is the most generous nation on earth when it comes to allowing legal immigration. We allow 1 million people a year to become U.S. citizens. That's more than all other countries on earth combined. So we should in no way feel guilty that we aren't doing enough to allow people to come in, especially when now many of them are not coming here because they love America, they're coming in to change America. And I can tell you from many people that I've visited with on their front porches, the first generation and second generation immigrants are sometimes, they're as patriotic, if not more patriotic, about how wonderful and exceptional our nation is, because they've come from a country where they didn't have the liberties that we have. And but we need people to come here and assimilate and become Americans and not try to change America.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Bean?
Again, I agree with Jeff. We need to enforce the laws that we have on the books. We don't need to water them down. We don't need to ignore them. We need to enforce the laws that are there. We have always had a good set of laws when it comes to immigration. I do believe that our immigration system could be upgraded and updated. I believe that if there are valuable workers who need to come and work here, that the green card or working process to allow that to happen needs to be improved and updated so that the wait is not years and years and years to get over here to work, but they can come and work and then they can go back home and it is illegal and we keep track of them and we know where they are. But There is plenty of laws on the books. We need to enforce them. We need to build up our border protection physically so that what is there, if it be a fence, then it needs to be a fence. If it needs to be aerial surveillance and ground surveillance, then that's what it needs to be. But there's plenty of opportunity for us to enforce our immigration laws and our border security.
Thank you, Ms. Bean. You have first response to the next question now.
And we've talked about it for a while. This is the last question on immigration in a sense, but what does the phrase "make our borders secure" mean to you in your thinking?
Well, I guess the most simple answer I can give you is that if you have a fence around your house and you want it secure, you don't want anybody coming through that fence. That's why you built a fence. That's why you have a border. That's why you have security there. So a secure border is one that is not penetrated. And as I said a minute ago, if it takes a wall and a fence, then that's what it takes. If it takes letting the word out to know that as soon as you get over here and you get caught, you're going back home. You're not going to pass go. You're not going to get $200. You're not going to get anything. You're going back where you came from. And that's the important part of our security and making our borders secure.
Judson?
I think the law enforcement term is we must have operational control of our borders. And that's multifaceted. So in some areas, it's physical barriers. In places where you have high traffic, people streaming across, we know where those places are. We do need to have physical barriers. But let's keep in mind, many people who are here illegally came across the border legally as students or as tourists or in other capacities. They walked across perfectly legally, straight through our border security, and then they overstayed their welcome. So it must also include some type of a electronic system, possibly a biometric system, to keep track of the people who are here in our country and to require that they leave when they're supposed to leave and keep track of where they are and why they're here. And that's part of controlling our borders.
The next question is a yes or no. Mr. Judson, you have first response.
Yes or no? Do you believe illegal immigrants who commit a felony should be deported?
Yes.
Yes.
The next question is also yes or no. Ms. Bean, you have first response.
Do you think driver permits should be provided to illegal immigrants?
No.
No.
The next series of questions are under the topic of transportation, which is very important to us in the state, as well as here in San Antonio, Texas specifically. Mr. Judson, you will have first response to the next question.
What solutions would you propose to deal with the traffic congestion along the Highway 281 corridor in our city?
Well, we need, one of the most important core functions of government is to provide adequate road capacity. There's nothing that affects the quality of life, probably many people in this audience, than sitting in traffic for hours a week because we've not provided adequate road capacity. When all of the right-of-way has already been purchased, there's grass that has to be mowed because it isn't being used for road capacity, and we need to add additional lanes. The money exists to do this now. There was $92 million that was dedicated by the county and given to Via Transit to build the streetcar. We've killed the streetcar. That money, that $92 million, the state legislation that allowed the collection of the tax for that, required that money be used as a matching grant to pull down gasoline tax, federal and state gas tax dollars at an 80-20 match rate. That would have generated $460 million if that $92 million had been used properly. $460 million is enough to have already started construction of widening of 281 without tolls and without HOV bus lanes and all of the other things that are a distraction from adding the capacity that we need. The money exists in the system. We need to add capacity to 281, to 1604, and we need to do that. It's a higher priority than the streetcar or the San Pedro Creek project or any of the multi-million-dollar projects that the government would rather spend the money on.
Ms. Bean?
Again, I get to echo Jeff, because certainly road capacity is the one thing that we all want to have. We want to have enough space and enough room for our transportation, our cars to get where they need to go. I do not approve of toll roads on existing lanes, so 281 is already an existing highway. There should never be a toll road there. It should be free and open, because that's the way it is an existing roadway. I don't think HOVs do anything more than simply take up the space that other cars need in order to go where they need to go. So I agree with Jeff in those areas, and that it is reallocating the money that was already there that needs to be spent appropriately on that highway.
Thank you, ma'am. You have the next question, first response, Ms. Bean.
All right. Redland Road is under construction from Loop 1604 to this school's entrance. What would you recommend to minimize the disruption, inconvenience, and congestion that will ensue?
Oh my goodness. It's actually under construction from Jones Maltzberger to 1604, and then from 1604 to 281. And that is a long stretch of road, and I have sat in the traffic going back from 1604 down Redland Road on our way to many different places. I'm not sure I have an answer for that, in all honesty. How do you avoid traffic congestions when a road's under construction? You complete it as quickly as possible. You don't let anything delay you. You make sure that the people that you have hired, unlike the Wurzbach Parkway, you make sure the people that you hire have the funds to complete the job in or under the allotted time, and you don't give it to a company that ends up bankrupt and spends years wasting our time trying to find ways to get it finished.
Mr. Judson?
Good answer, Sheila. I'm glad you answered first so I could sit and think about an answer. But actually, she hit the nail on the head. The key is to accelerate the completion of these projects. These projects take entirely too long because they do them in little teeny pieces. You go through these construction zones day after day, and a lot of times you don't see any activity. It's just, these orange cones and raw ditches dug up, and there's nothing happening. In Houston, they expanded the Katy Freeway, a long expanse of IH-10, and it was going to take 20 years to do it. And the mayor of Houston, who was very meat and potatoes, kind of core function loving mayor, said, we can't handle this construction and congestion for 20 years. Let's accelerate this. So instead of the 80-20 match, Houston pitched in half the money, and they built that Katy Freeway expansion in a fraction of the time. And it's a marvelous. They reduced congestion in Houston in real terms by accelerating that project. If our local officials thought that adding capacity was a high enough priority, they could do that here locally too.
Thank you, sir. The next question, candidates, is a yes or no. Ms. Judson, you have first response.
Yes or no? Should existing highways be turned into toll roads?
No.
No.
The next question is also a yes or no. Ms. Bean, you have first response.
Should an existing free lane on Highway 281 be converted to an HOV bus-only lane?
No.
No.
The next question is also a yes or no. Mr. Judson, you have first response.
Should 25% of the gasoline tax still go to public schools?
No.
No.
And this last question on transportation is, I guess you get a little chance to explain. In light of extremely low gas prices caused by the revolution in fracking, would you support raising the gasoline tax to increase funding for our state transportation system? Please explain.
Ms. Bean?
No, I would not encourage or support raising of taxes. That's my answer. I do not believe we need to raise taxes on gasoline taxes or anything else.
No, I don't think it's necessary. We have plenty of money in the transportation system now. What we need to focus on is using the dollars that we have more wisely. The legislature just added billions of dollars extra to our road funding system this last legislative session. We need to take a breather with adding more money and start using our dollars more wisely. We need to stop wasting money on transit projects that don't improve mobility. We need to stop wasting money on things the gasoline tax is a good user fee. So people who pay the gasoline tax should benefit from what is spent on the gasoline tax. When you waste gasoline tax money on transit, on bike trails, on sidewalks, on complete streets, and very fancy landscaping and everything, you're not benefiting the driving public. And I think we need to get back to requiring that the gasoline tax be limited to adding road capacity that reduces congestion or makes our streets safer, and find other sources of revenue for bike trails and sidewalks, which are good things to have, but not at the expense of our road capacity.
Thank you, candidates. The next series of questions are on the topic of sanctity of life. Mr. Judson, you have first response to the next question.
Mr. Judson, how have you demonstrated your belief and commitment on issues of life in your family, your faith community, and in the public square?
Well, I know Sheila and I have both been endorsed by Texas Right to Life, and I've admired the work that Alan Parker has done for many, many years. I've been active here locally on the public relations battle and fighting the regulations that allowed the abortion facility to be grandfathered and granted its zoning at 2104 Babcock in the medical center. And I feel that was a terrible outcome, that the city broke all of its own rules to allow that facility to be built and to operate, and it continues to this day. So I have 3 beautiful children. They're not really children anymore. They're 2 in high school, 1 in college, and I believe that we're created in God's image, and that life begins at conception and ends in natural death, and we should protect that at all costs.
Ms. Bean?
Can I have double the time on this one?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay. Well, I don't know where to start with this because I am 100% pro-life. A quick fact is that I am actually the survivor of an attempted abortion, but not because my mother wanted it, but because she was told that she had a tubular pregnancy and that she would have to have an abortion in order to survive and take care of her son and her husband, who just returned from World War II. Come to find out, it was a cyst, it was drained, and she was fine. I was born 6 months later. As I progressed through life, my family always was very pro-life. When I was married and my husband and I, after 9 years, found out we could not have children, we adopted 2 children from the Gladney Center in Fort Worth. Those mothers chose to make adoption the positive option. Even when we had only adopted 1, but had the second one ready to be considered for adoption, or the time wait was there, my husband and I were out doing high school home economic classes, presentations on the positive points of adoption. And then at 42, when I became pregnant for the first time after 20 years of marriage, I told my obstetrician, whatever God has designed inside my body for my baby, that is what she will be, she or he will be. There will be no doubt that there's no reason for testing. And it goes on. My children have stood in the life chain since they were 3 and 5 years old, when they were teenagers, as adults. Our whole family has done everything that's pro-life. Thank you.
Ms. Bean, you have the first response to the next question, please.
Please comment on House Bill 2 that passed after 2 special sessions in 2013 It requires both that abortions be performed in ambulatory surgical centers and also that doctors have admitting privileges in local hospitals.
Those were wonderful bills that were passed. They came in the 2013 session. I found it interesting as I looked into Speaker Straus, who we've not mentioned too much here tonight, but then I was told by the legislative assistant, the legislative aide for Texas Right to Life, about 3 weeks ago when he was here in San Antonio for a Life, Liberty, and Property tour, that in 2011, when we got the sonogram bill passed, we worked hard. Pro-life people worked extremely hard to get that passed. 2013 session came along, and Joe Straus's people told him, don't expect anything out of this session. We gave you the sonogram bill, which they didn't give anything out, and don't expect anything. True to life, in the 2013 session, Joe Straus blocked 100% of the pro-life bills that came to the House committees. Not one pro-life bill came out of committee in 2013 regular session because of Governor Abbott's special session. The second session covered water, infrastructure, water, and pro-life issues. These bills were passed due to Governor Perry, maybe I said Abbott, but Governor Perry's insistence that the House release these bills and let them be passed.
Sir?
I think House Bill 2 was a demonstration that these bills, these pro-life bills, are about women's life and women's health. They're very pro-woman. They're not. It's not part of the war on women. This is to protect women's health, and I think that it is in line with, again, the efforts of Alan Parker in getting over 4,000 testimonies from women across the country given to the federal court system from women who have had abortions, testifying of the tremendous pain, physical and emotional pain that they have suffered throughout their lives and the great regret that they have in having an abortion. And we should do everything we can to protect women from making that mistake. Unfortunately, abortion is legal in the United States, but it should be exceedingly rare, and we should do everything we can to help women make the right decision. That's a very pro-woman position, and I think House Bill 2 was in line with that.
The next question is a yes or no. Mr. Judson, you have first response.
Given your responses to the past couple questions, I think the answers here are going to be pretty obvious, but it's worth asking anyway. Yes or no? Have you received and accepted a campaign donation from Planned Parenthood or any of its directors?
No.
No.
The next question is also yes or no. Ms. Bean, you have first response.
Has a pro-abortion organization ever rated you 100% in their favor?
They've not ever even talked to me, communicated with me, or had anything to do with me. No.
No. Thank you, Candace. The next category, the next two questions, are the topic of religious liberty. Mr. Judson, you have first response.
Should a government employee who is required to perform an action that violates their moral conscience still be compelled to do so? Please explain.
No, they should not. And there were 14 religious liberties bills that were introduced this last legislative session, and 13 of them died in the House. The only one that passed was a pastor protection bill, and the pastor protection bill was, all of these bills were introduced in anticipation of the Supreme Court creating a right to same-sex marriage. The pastor protection bill was a bill that would have protected pastors and churches from being sued, where people could force them to perform a same-sex marriage against their core doctrines and beliefs, which is something we would not want to happen. That bill was introduced in the House. It sat there and sat there and sat there with no hearing. The Senate, the Lieutenant Governor got a senator to introduce the bill on an emergency basis. It was passed by the Senate easily, went to the House. It almost died again in the House until literally hundreds of pastors went to Austin to lobby to get that bill passed. The other 13 bills died, one of which was the bill that would have protected child welfare organizations who, if they're forced to give up for adoption a child to a same-sex couple against their religious beliefs, they will go out of business rather than do that. Think of the chaos that that would cause if we don't pass these protections next session.
Ms. Bean?
All of a sudden, my mind went blank. I believe that we need to, excuse me, give me your question again. I was thinking of all the answers.
Start the clock. Repeat, please.
That's right. Should a government employee who is required to perform an action that violates their moral conscience still be compelled to do so?
The answer is no, they should not be compelled to do so. They should have the religious freedom to have their own religious convictions and to be able to carry out their convictions whether they're in a position as the lady with the clerk's office and the marriage license that we heard so much about in the news. I believe that if their religious convictions are against what their position is, they're going to have to step aside, but they do not have to carry it out. I believe that we have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion here in the state, in the United States and in Texas. So we need to protect everyone's religious freedoms, regardless of what kind of job they have and what is expected of them in that job. They have a right to refuse.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question, Ms. Bean, you have first response.
Do you believe the Pastor's Protection Bill, sponsored by 60% of House members in 2015, should have been allowed to be voted on?
Yes. Is this a yes or no, or is this no? Okay. Yes, it needed to be voted on. The Pastor Protection Bill is vital. I agree that the other 13 bills that were presented also needed to be voted on. One of the things that frustrates me the most about Speaker Straus' leadership is that the rest of Texas has been hogtied and muzzled by his wall of obstruction that he has put up. The rest of Texas has elected wonderful, very conservative, very popular, of course, if they're elected, representatives. But the rest of Texas's voice cannot be released because of Speaker Straus's obstruction in these areas of religious freedom or any other area that we know that the rest of Texas stands for. So we've got to remove Speaker Straus from not only the speakership, but we've got to give this district a voice for the values that it has here in San Antonio and in our area. It's very important that these representatives' voices are heard over his objections.
Sir?
Yes, the Pastor Protection Bill should have been allowed to be voted on. I cannot emphasize enough the active hostility that we suffer to these ideas in the Texas House by the leadership of the Texas House. The chairman of the House State Affairs Committee, Byron Cook, is actively hostile to these religious liberties concepts. He refuses to grant a hearing. When you refuse to grant a hearing to a bill, it's a message to everybody that just shut up, you don't care, we don't care about your views, we don't care about the majority will of the House or the Senate. This is my committee and I'm not letting this move. And Byron Cook, who's been the State Affairs Committee is probably the most powerful, along with the Appropriations Committee of the House. Byron Cook has, rather than allow a hearing on these religious liberty bills, he would introduce his own bill to remove the words mother and father from birth certificates. And so, now, why would he do such a thing? I mean, we know what the agenda is there, but that bill is probably not going to pass on the floor of the House. It's definitely not going to pass in the Senate. It'll probably be vetoed by the governor. So why would you do something like that unless you're just actively hostile in a self-destructive way?
Thank you, Candace. The last order of business for tonight's questions is fiscal matters and fiscal responsibility. Mr. Judson, you have first response.
What are 2 or 3 specific examples that show that you are fiscally responsible?
Well, I drive my cars until they literally fall apart at 200,000 or 300,000 miles. No, but I guess, you know, my history with fiscal responsibility has been in my fight against the streetcar and in trying to save Texas, San Antonio taxpayers from not only the $2 billion it would have cost to build those 2 systems, back the one proposed in 2000 and the one proposed last year, but also the ongoing tremendous subsidies, operational subsidies and capital subsidies that would have been required for decades and decades and decades. So that's my record is one of accomplishment in stopping those programs, and now we just need to get that money reprogrammed to its intended purpose to add road capacity and make our streets and highways safer.
Ma'am?
Well, Jeff, I think my husband's got you beat. He's sitting back here. Randy, how many miles does that Dodge Neon have on it? 500,000 miles. I think we beat you on that one. And he's got a second and a third one because he loves the Dodge Neons, and they all have at least 200 or 300,000 miles on them also. So we do, just like Jeff, we drive our cars until they fall apart, and we just keep using them to put the other ones back together. Physically responsible myself. My husband and I, many years ago, decided to be debt-free. And we followed Dave Ramsey's program. Yes, ma'am. We followed Dave Ramsey's program, and we had, with the help of some funds after my parents passed away, we paid off our mortgage. That was our last debt. We live debt-free. We do not, I will admit we use credit cards, but we use them only if there is always enough money in the bank to cover any charges that are there. Regardless of that, I believe that a government needs to be fiscally responsible in a like manner. You don't borrow funds unless you have to. I know that this is bonds and those items have to be considered. But as a fiscally responsible person, that's the one thing that we did when we ran our business. We invested our money back into our business. We did not borrow funds in order to build it up. We took a sacrifice ourselves in order to invest the money to make our business grow.
Thank you. The next question you have right, first response.
Well, you both sound like fiscally, individually responsible people. Congratulations. What spending changes would you work to bring about in the state budget for Texas? What spending changes in the state budget would you work to bring about?
Spending changes in the state budget. I'm going to be honest with you. I am new at this politicians or political things. I have watched the state budget in the past. I don't have a lot of detailed information on it, but I do believe that we need to make sure that our state budget is based on spending growth and with the population and inflation rate, that we need to make sure that we do not grow spending faster than the population plus inflation. So there needs to be a basis for any growth in spending. I believe in zero-based budgeting. To my understanding, that is when the departments have to go back and qualify where they have spent their money and how they have been responsible in spending it, so that we do not add money on top of wasted money in departments that are not fiscally responsible. So those are 2 items that I think we need to look at: zero-based budgeting and growth of population and inflation.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Back when I started working at the Texas Public Policy Foundation in 1995, Alan Parker had just prior to that sued the state of Texas by not following its own spending limitations, which are in statute. They were not being followed. We have a spending limitation, or did at the time, that the growth of the budget could not exceed the growth of the economy. And then they played little games to where they never really followed that. And I do think that we need to strengthen the spending limitations to where we limit growth to population plus inflation. There's plenty of room to meet our priorities without having to grow government beyond where it is today on population inflation, allowing for population inflation growth. The other thing that I think we need to do is the state needs to assert more control over the growth in spending at the municipal level. At the federal government, all power is granted to the states by the Constitution except the enumerated powers given to the federal government. At the state level, all power is given to the state with only certain powers granted to the municipalities. But we've given so much free power to the municipalities that they have increased their debt loads and their spending to where it's creating a huge burden on citizens, and we need to rein that back in and assert some controls at the state level.
Thank you. The last panelist question, Ms. Judson, you have first response. It is a yes or no question.
Yes or no? Would you vote to end the forced collection of union dues by local government?
Yes.
Yes.
Candace, thank you very much. That concludes the panelist questions, but we have solicited questions from the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, of all the ones who submitted a question, please know that due to our time constraints, not every question is going to be asked during the panel session. You are very welcome to take your question directly to the candidates afterwards, as they will be able to stay and give you the response to the questions if it wasn't read. So let's begin. Ms. Bean, you'll have the first response on this question. The topic is sex education. Do you support abstinence plus contraception education, where abstinence is encouraged, yet the conception ideology is still taught and also promoted? Please explain.
I support abstinence education. I do not support the enlargement of the way, I'm not familiar with how you just described it, but I do support abstinence education. I believe the kids need to know that it works and that it is the answer to any future problems they may have in that regard. So I would not expand it.
Sir?
The only thing that really works is abstinence. It's, of course, the biblically correct thing to do, but from a standpoint of just public health, there is really no way to prevent the continued explosion of sexually transmitted diseases just at a shocking rate other than abstinence, and that's what I support.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Jones, you have the next question. It is a controversial question. I'll read it as it is written. What would you do to further LGBT rights in District 21?
Who gets to go first on that?
You do, sir.
I would not do anything to further LGBT rights.
Ma'am?
I agree. I would not do anything to further it. I believe that people have rights within their own homes and in wherever they are to believe how they want. But I believe that we too often step on other people's, where there's not a problem, we don't need to make a problem. And that's what we did.
Ms. Bean?
Can I just add that I don't think that...
Actually, no, sir, you
I
can't.
can't? Okay.
Please, if you have to bring that up, you need to bring that up separately. Ms. Bean, we have the next question for you. The question is this: why did the House leadership want to remove mother or father from birth certificates? Your position, please.
Well, we have a mother and we have a father, and they ought to be listed on the birth certificates. And there would be no reason in my mind to ever remove the name mother or father. And I think it's interesting, something you may not know, is that prior to about 1955, and I was born prior to that, the birth certificates had on them a question box that said legitimate, yes or no. My birth certificate says, and if you students aren't sure about that, is this a birth out of wedlock or a birth to a person who wasn't married? It was called an illegitimate birth. And my birth certificate, my parents were married, so I was, quote, legitimate. But Edna Gladney, who we adopted our children from her home in the 50s, said that children should not bear the responsibility, the actions of their parents. So she had it removed from all of your birth certificates. So there are some things that don't need to be on the birth certificate, but we always need to have a space and the name, mother and father.
Thank you, Ma'am. The last question is a yes or no. Ms. Bean. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to answer? Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Let's be honest. This is not about ending discrimination against the LGBT community. This is about redefining what is the fundamental unit of society, which is the natural family. That is a very, very important part of the agenda, to completely redefine what a family is. And all of these things, changing the mother and father on the birth certificate, and that is a part of the agenda to do that. We must stop it at all costs. And we do not need to feel guilty that we're being hateful, we're not loving. We love all these people. Every LGBT person is made in God's image, just like all the rest of us, and they deserve our love, and they have God's love, and it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with preserving the natural family.
Thank you, sir. You have the first response to this last question. It is a yes or no. It is on the topic of accountability. Will you commit to sponsoring and supporting legislative bills that promote pro-family values?
Yes.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you give a hand to our candidates? At this time, we'll give you 90 seconds for closing remarks to the assembled group. And because, Ms. Bean, you have the opening remark, Mr. Judson, you have first response.
These have been great questions. I hope they've been revealing to you all about what's at stake in this election. I would just ask that you please, at sometime in the next week, or however long it takes you, to please email 50 of your friends or tell 50 of your friends who you're voting for and what's at stake in this election. This is going to be a very, very close election. We would love to beat Joe Straus outright. We may only force him into a runoff, which would mean we'd have another 3 months to tell the story. We're at a handicap because this election, this primary, is very, very early this year. It's on March 1st. It's never been that early in Texas before. It used to be in May, and then it was moved up into April. Now it's March 1st. So people have really just started paying attention right after the first of the year to this election. But the polls show we are very, very close to at least getting to a runoff, but we need truth to multiply through word of mouth. The most effective way to get a message out and to influence the vote is not the mailers that we send out or the TV commercials or the radio spots, but it's a friend telling a friend who they're going to vote for. That by far is the most effective, because the channel gets changed when the commercial comes on, the mail gets thrown in the trash, but friends listen to their friends. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bean?
I declared my candidacy on October the 2nd, and October the 7th, I attended my first Shark Tank, where we had to go and answer questions. I grew tremendously just by attending that and listening. You have grown me, you have stretched me tonight. I appreciate the depth of your questions and the challenge that you've given us to give you these answers. I stand firmly on the answers that I have given. I know what my foundations are. I asked for your vote. I need your vote also. Jeff and I both want to, our purpose in running is to defeat Joe Straus. We have to remove Mr. Straus, not only from this district, but when we remove him from this district, as said earlier, we are releasing the power, potential, and the voice of the rest of the entire state of Texas. This has got to be the most important district election this year in this state. Please, as Jeff said, get the word out. Our brochures are at the back. Take them with you. I have more in the car. I'll bring more in. Share them. As Jeff said, exactly that. When you have a friend tell you about someone, you listen. When the radio comes on, you start talking. But when the brochures, how many people have said, the bigger Joe's brochures get, the faster they go in the trash. Well, I don't want our information to go in the trash. You are the key to making the turnout, the voter turnout for this election to be our success for Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, could you please thank our candidates for being here? I would also like to express my extreme gratitude to the members of the panel committee who presented the questions. And if you'll forgive me not to choose out one over the four of you, I really want to thank Joshua for his role here. It is an amazing thing to see a young man this interested in his city, his state, and hopefully his country. So for your dedication to this night tonight, and of course to all of your fellow members of the team, may God bless you for your courage. Before we dismiss, I have some closing announcements, if I may. I'd like to let you know about a very important thing that's going on. On Thursday, February the 18th, at 7:30 p.m. at Christian Family Church, we're holding a district-wide prayer rally. I am going to be there because this is my district. And I'm not going to come pray for a candidate. I'm going to come that God's will be done. And I think we need to do that. We saw how effective prayer was when we did the mayoral elections here and our city council elections. And we literally turned the world upside down through prayer. And so I invite every single one of you to please come out and pray for this election. Also to let you know, you will find a voter's guide at Salt and Light SA, that's all one word, saltandlightsa.org, on or before next Monday, February the 15th, which is the day before early elections. Also, voters' guides are going to be distributed to churches within District 121. We are going to start distributing them on Saturday, February the 13th at 9 a.m. If you're able to give 2 or 3 hours of your time, would you please go by the Joshua Initiative table and see Mr. Cadell and Roseanne and sign up to do something good. We vote with our feet, but we also help people get elected with our feet. So please, help distribute those voter guides as best you can. And lastly, I would strongly suggest that you visit the display tables of our candidates, because there is good information there. I understand that they will be here for some time after the close of our official forum for you to ask questions of them and to get to know them. I will tell you, as we have often found in our experience working with the political process, that candidates and elected officials do not fear a voter, but they fear an informed and principled voter. So come and be informed. Vote your principles. Vote the Bible. In Jesus' name we pray. So thank you for coming this evening. God bless you all. May we bow our head in a final prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for these two courageous people who you have called out from among the many to represent us. Father, I thank you for their courage. I thank you for their wisdom. I ask, Father, that you remove every obstacle to the path you placed them upon. And Father, your will be done in their life, because we know that they have your heart, Father. They have your will, that they're willing to actually live and bring the manifestation within our district. And Father, I pray for all these young people, Lord, that you now put within their heart the desire to participate in what you've given us. You never invented politics, Lord, but you invented governance, and you gave it to us. You told us in the book of Luke, occupy until I come, and we will do so, Father. And I pray that this next generation, if you tarry, will spearhead righteousness in our legislatures, in our city councils, and Father, even in our White House. So Father, I just ask you that you bless everyone tonight. Father, thank you for the opportunity to hear. Bless all that are here in the name of Jesus. Amen. God bless everybody. Thank you for coming. Please meet the candidates, and we'll see you at the prayer rally.